Do you want to become a machine? Here's a secret. It doesn't work. I've been seduced by the promises of unfailing efficiency, trying to transform myself into a robot that operates nonstop. But the truth is, the more I try to ignore my own humanity, the more exhausted and frustrated I become. I'm going to share a completely different approach that changed my perspective. Let's embrace our humanity with all its emotions and imperfections and discover how that can be the real key to genuine and sustainable productivity. I invite you to join me on this introspective journey and question everything you've heard about being efficient and successful. Chapter 1: The Great Discovery. Throughout life, we often find ourselves needing to understand ourselves in deeper and subtler ways. Living with our emotions daily is one of those aspects we often neglect, partly because we are so immersed in a culture that values logic and efficiency. There's a tendency to compare our reasoning abilities to the precision of machines, idealizing a sort of robotic mind that isn't influenced by feelings. However, we are human, and our emotional complexity is an undeniable trait. I remember a time when, in pursuit of maximum productivity, I tried to suppress my emotions, believing they were just distractions. It was like trying to ignore a headache and keep working as if nothing was wrong. It didn't take long to realize that this method was not only ineffective but also harmful. Emotions don't disappear just because we choose to ignore them. They continue to exist, often manifesting in unexpected and even harmful ways, affecting our decisions and mental health. Contrary to what some might think, emotions are an essential part of our decision-making process. They work like a signaling system that alerts us to situations that need attention, whether positive or negative. A clear example is the nervousness we feel before an important presentation. Instead of being an emotion to avoid, nervousness can prepare us to do our best by keeping us alert and focused. Learning to recognize and interpret these emotional signals can transform our approach to work and life. The big promise of productivity hacks often sells the idea that there's a magic formula to being more efficient. Who hasn't tried to implement one of these techniques, expecting miraculous results? I've followed a strict schedule inspired by one of these methods, only to find myself more tired and less accomplished at the end of the day. It's easy to fall for the illusion that we can surpass our natural limits, but the truth is that these shortcuts often ignore our human nature. They may work temporarily, but they rarely lead to sustainable productivity. The challenge lies in accepting that we are not machines and that our efficiency cannot be measured solely by completed tasks. True productivity, then, isn't about working more or faster, but working smarter. And this includes integrating our emotions into the process. It's a journey of self-discovery, where we start seeing our emotions not as enemies but as allies. In my daily life, I started practicing emotional regulation, a process that involves recognizing and managing my emotions instead of repressing them. On particularly stressful days, instead of ignoring the stress, I take a break, breathe deeply, and try to understand what's causing the feeling. This practice has helped me avoid burnout and make clearer, more aligned decisions with my values. Emotional integration also invites us to be more authentic. In a world where efficiency is often equated with success, it's easy to fall into the trap of always wanting to appear in control and focused. However, being authentic means acknowledging our moments of vulnerability and uncertainty. I remember a time when, feeling particularly overwhelmed, I decided to share this feeling with my colleagues. The response was surprisingly positive. Many identified with my situation and shared their own experiences. This created a more collaborative and supportive work environment, where everyone felt more comfortable expressing their concerns. Moreover, learning to embrace our emotions can help us develop resilience, the ability to bounce back from adversity. Instead of seeing every obstacle as a personal failure, we can start to see these moments as opportunities to grow and learn. An example of this is when we face criticism. The first reaction might be defensive, a natural emotion, but by embracing that emotion and analyzing the criticism constructively, we can gain valuable lessons for the future. If you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Your subscription helps us keep creating content with love and dedication. Chapter 2: Recognizing Your Emotions. For a long time, I also fell into the trap of seeing emotions like guilt or fear as enemies to be defeated. I thought that to be productive, I had to be immune to these feelings, always maintaining an optimistic and indestructible stance. However, over time, I realized that these emotions, far from being obstacles, are actually important signals that indicate unmet needs or unresolved issues in our lives. For example, the fear we feel before a new challenge can signal that we care deeply about the outcome, revealing a genuine desire to do well. The journey to recognizing and understanding our emotions begins with a simple but often challenging act of paying attention to what we're feeling. It's surprising how often we struggle to accurately name what we're experiencing internally. I remember several occasions when I confused anxiety with laziness, blaming myself for not being able to concentrate on a task when, in fact, I was overwhelmed by a deep fear of not being good enough. This lack of emotional clarity can lead to automatic reactions like procrastination or avoidance, which take us away from our true goals. It's essential to learn to identify and accurately name our emotions. When I started practicing this, I noticed that often my overreactions to certain situations were linked to misunderstood feelings. For example, when feeling guilty for not meeting a deadline, I realized that the guilt reflected my own perfectionist standards, not necessarily an objective failure. This awareness allowed me to adopt a more compassionate stance toward myself, understanding that the guilt was pointing to a need to adjust my expectations and set healthier boundaries. Emotions also play a crucial role in how we behave in the face of challenges and opportunities. In various situations, I've noticed that the shame of making a mistake or appearing incompetent has prevented me from trying something new. This fear of failure can be paralyzing, but by acknowledging the shame and exploring its origin, I could see that it was rooted in past experiences of judgment and criticism. This understanding allowed me to diffuse the power of this emotion, enabling me to take more risks and accept the possibility of mistakes as a natural part of growth and learning. We mustn't forget that these often unwanted emotions carry important messages about our values and concerns. Guilt, for example, can indicate that we feel we're straying from our principles or neglecting something important. Instead of suppressing this feeling, we can use it as an opportunity to reflect on what we truly value and make the necessary adjustments in our actions. Similarly, fear can signal that we are about to step out of our comfort zone, which, though scary, is often where the greatest personal and professional advances occur. Another important aspect is how these emotions influence our interactions with others. In a workplace context, for example, feelings of inadequacy can lead to defensive behaviors or a constant search for external validation. However, by understanding that these feelings are natural and common, we can approach situations with more authenticity and less fear of judgment. Sharing our vulnerabilities creates a more human and empathetic space, where people feel comfortable being themselves and growing together. Recognizing and working with our emotions is also crucial for self-care. We often ignore important emotional signals in the name of productivity, leading to burnout. I've personally experienced periods where, instead of attending to signs of stress and fatigue, I kept pushing beyond my limits, convinced that work was more important than my well-being. Over time, I've learned that respecting my emotions and needs is essential to maintaining sustainable productivity and a balanced life. Chapter 3. Understanding guilt. Guilt is an emotion that many of us experience at some point in life, but we rarely receive guidance on how to understand and deal with it healthily. It's a feeling that usually arises when we perceive our actions, or lack thereof, as conflicting with our personal values or expectations we believe to be important. On several occasions, I've been overwhelmed by this emotion, whether from a thoughtless word or a missed opportunity. In this sense, guilt serves as a moral compass, alerting us to something we feel deeply needs correction or amending. However, guilt can also become an emotional anchor, heavy and difficult to release, especially when not addressed with clarity. I recall a time when I made a mistake at work that had consequences for the team. The weight of the guilt I felt was almost unbearable, a constant reminder of my error that seemed to overshadow all other achievements. This feeling of having failed not only myself but also others can create a vicious cycle of self-recrimination. It's easy to fall into the trap of letting guilt paralyze us, making us avoid facing new situations that could expose us to new errors. This paralysis is one of the most destructive aspects of guilt. When we let ourselves be consumed by it, the tendency is to procrastinate, avoid making decisions, or take on responsibilities, fearing that they will intensify the feeling of inadequacy. Guilt becomes a lens through which everything is viewed, distorting our perception of competence and capability. Instead of being a tool for growth, it becomes an obstacle, blocking any significant progress. I have personally been stuck for days, hesitating to take the next step, afraid of making another mistake that could add to the guilt I was already carrying. Acknowledging guilt constructively is essential to avoid this downward spiral. By accepting the emotion without getting bogged down in it, we can begin to separate the mistake from our personal worth. A bad decision or a specific failure does not define us as individuals. This distinction is crucial to understanding that while we may err, we still have the power to correct our course. Practices like self-reflection have been vital for me. When I take time to reflect on what really happened and why I feel guilty, I often find that the guilt is rooted in an unrealistic expectation or an exaggerated interpretation of the impact of my actions. Dialoguing with trusted people, whether friends or professionals like therapists, has also proven to be a helpful practice. Talking about my emotions, especially those that seem hardest to process, helps clarify my thoughts and feelings. In these conversations, I often find that the weight of guilt diminishes as I share it and receive different perspectives. It's a way of shedding new light on guilt, often revealing it is not as devastating as it initially seemed. Once guilt is acknowledged, the next step is to transform it into a force for good. Rather than sinking into regret and self-pity, we can use guilt as a catalyst for positive change. This process begins with learning from the mistakes made. I ask myself, what has this experience taught me? This simple question opens the door to growth, allowing us to see failure not as an end but as a learning step. Understanding the causes and context that led to the mistake is crucial to avoiding its repetition in the future. Creating an action plan is another strategy that can be incredibly effective. This plan can include anything from changes in daily practices to developing new skills. I remember a time when, after a communication error caused misunderstandings at work, I decided to improve my communication skills. I enrolled in a course and started actively practicing clarity and assertiveness in my interactions. This action not only mitigated the guilt I felt, but also helped me grow as a professional. Self-forgiveness is an essential component in this transformation process. Accepting that everyone makes mistakes and that these are part of the human experience is liberating. For me, this involved a conscious practice of self-compassion, reminding myself that perfection is an illusion and that progress is the real goal. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn and grow, and self-forgiveness is what allows this lesson to transform into positive action rather than stagnation. Chapter 4: Facing Shame. Shame is an emotion that often lurks in the shadows of our psyche, emerging at unexpected moments to remind us of our perceived shortcomings and how we see ourselves in relation to others. For me, shame has been a constant presence, a subtle voice that surfaces in situations where I feel I've not met expected standards, whether personal or social. It has its roots deeply embedded in our sense of self-worth, often tied to how we believe others perceive us. From an early age, we are influenced by experiences that shape our self-view, creating an internal narrative about what is acceptable or not. I believe the origins of shame can be traced back to early social interactions and the messages we receive from society. As a child, I remember instances where simply being ridiculed for a silly mistake at school triggered a whirlwind of feelings of inadequacy. These moments, though small, left marks that contributed to an exaggerated sense of self-consciousness. Cultural and social expectations amplify these feelings, promoting standards of behavior and appearance that, when not met, can trigger a profound sense of shame. This feeling doesn't arise only from major traumatic events. It can stem from small criticisms or judgments we absorb throughout life. In everyday life, shame can be a paralyzing force. I recall many occasions when I avoided expressing an idea or taking the initiative for fear of being judged or ridiculed. This fear, fueled by shame, can manifest as procrastination or even an aversion to situations that expose us somehow. It's as if shame creates an invisible barrier, preventing us from stepping out of our comfort zone and exploring new opportunities. The feeling of inadequacy can undermine motivation and make decision-making difficult, especially those involving risks or significant changes. Recognizing the presence of shame is the first step in confronting it. Often, it operates at a subconscious level, making it challenging to identify directly. It was only through self-awareness practices, such as introspective reflection, that I began to notice how shame influenced my choices and behaviors. Compassionate self-talk was also crucial in this process. Instead of harshly criticizing myself for feeling shame, I learned to approach these feelings with curiosity and understanding, asking myself where they came from and what they really meant. This introspection revealed that often, shame was linked to unrealistic or internalized expectations of perfection. Creating a safe environment to discuss these feelings is also vital. Sharing experiences of shame with trusted people can be a powerful antidote. When I started to open up about my insecurities, I found that many around me also dealt with similar feelings. This exchange not only helped me normalize the experience of shame, but also build a support network where vulnerability is accepted and respected. In this space, it's possible to challenge the limiting beliefs that underpin shame and begin to replace them with healthier, more balanced perspectives. Despite seeming like a purely negative emotion, shame can be transformed into a force for good. Once we recognize and understand our shame, we can use it as a tool for personal growth. Facing shame head-on, without fleeing or disguising it, is an exercise in courage that helps us develop resilience. Every time we confront our fears of exposure or judgment, we strengthen our ability to handle challenging situations and become more authentic. This authenticity, in turn, reconnects us with our core values and goals that truly matter. Transforming shame into a catalyst for growth also involves practicing self-acceptance and compassion. Learning to forgive oneself for not being perfect or for making mistakes is essential. This forgiveness is a reminder that we are all human, imperfect by nature, and our dignity doesn't depend on meeting unattainable standards. Instead of allowing shame to dictate our actions, we can use these experiences as opportunities to reaffirm our commitment to our growth and well-being. Thus, shame need not be a constant burden. By exploring its roots and understanding its impact, we can dismantle the narratives that trap us in a cycle of self-criticism and fear. Chapter 5. Overcoming fear. Fear is an emotion as old as humanity itself, a biological response designed to protect us from perceived threats. In my personal journey, I found that fear can take many forms, from the terror in the face of real and immediate danger to a persistent anxiety about hypothetical situations that may never happen. There are concrete fears such as accidents or illnesses, but also subtler psychological fears like the fear of failure, rejection, or uncertainty. These fears, though less visible, can profoundly impact our lives, silently shaping our decisions and behaviors. In my experience, the fear of failure has been one of the most paralyzing forms of this emotion. I often found myself hesitating before new opportunities, afraid of not meeting expectations, both mine and others. This type of fear can be so insidious that, without realizing it, we end up censoring ourselves, avoiding risks that could lead us to great achievements. In moments of introspection, I realized that this fear was often rooted in a concern about how others perceive me and a need for approval, both social and professional. The influence of fear on productivity is evident. How many times have I procrastinated important tasks simply out of fear of not being able to perform them perfectly? This procrastination is not just a matter of lack of discipline. It's deeply linked to the avoidance of situations we fear. Fear creates a mental barrier that prevents us from acting, generating a cycle of inaction. We avoid facing challenges, which, in turn, diminishes our confidence in our abilities. With each missed opportunity, the sense of helplessness grows, reinforcing the fear and thus perpetuating stagnation. To face and overcome fear, the key is not to try to eliminate it completely, but to learn to manage it. One approach I found helpful is gradual exposure to fear-inducing situations. For example, if I'm afraid of public speaking, starting with small groups and gradually increasing the audience size can help build confidence. This practice of controlled exposure allows the brain to familiarize itself with the feared situation, reducing the anxiety response over time. Another effective strategy is using breathing and mindfulness techniques. In moments of panic, breathing tends to become shallow and rapid, exacerbating the feeling of fear. By focusing on long, deep breaths, it's possible to calm the nervous system and reduce the intensity of the fear response. The practice of mindfulness also helped me observe my thoughts and feelings with an attitude of acceptance without trying to judge or suppress them. This allowed me to see fear as a transient emotion rather than a defining characteristic of who I am. Reframing fear as a learning opportunity was another crucial step. Instead of seeing fear as an insurmountable obstacle, I began to view it as a sign that I'm stepping out of my comfort zone. This reframe helped me adopt a growth mindset where failure is not seen as an end but as an inevitable and valuable part of the learning process. I remember a situation where, instead of avoiding a challenging project out of fear of failure, I decided to dive in, accepting from the start that mistakes were a possibility. This acceptance made the experience much richer and less terrifying, allowing me to learn and grow in ways I never imagined. Turning fear into a source of motivation is perhaps one of the most powerful changes I've experienced. By recontextualizing fear, seeing it as an indicator that I'm about to do something significant, I began to use this emotion as fuel for action. Setting clear and meaningful goals was crucial for this. When I have a clear vision of where I want to go and why it's important to me, fear loses some of its paralyzing power and transforms into an incentive to move forward. The support of a network is invaluable in this process. Talking to mentors, friends, or colleagues about my fears not only provides me with new perspectives, but also encourages me to face these emotions head-on. These people often remind me that fear is a natural part of life, and that we all deal with similar insecurities at some point. This kind of encouragement can make all the difference, helping us feel that we are not alone in our struggle against fear. Thus, facing fear is an ongoing process of learning and adaptation. With each new challenge, fear may resurface, but with each experience, we acquire new tools and skills to deal with it more effectively. Fear, when understood and managed appropriately, can become an ally in our journey, pushing us beyond our limits and helping us achieve levels of fulfillment that would otherwise be impossible. Chapter 6: Awareness. For a long time, I believed that the challenges to my productivity were solely external or due to daily demands. However, over time, I realized that I often am my own biggest obstacle. Limiting beliefs and self-sabotage are like shadows hiding in the corners of the mind, subtly but powerfully influencing decisions and actions. These limiting beliefs are often inherited from past experiences or societal expectations that we absorb without questioning. I remember a time when I avoided taking on new responsibilities, believing I couldn't handle the pressure. This idea of incapacity, repeated so often in my mind, became a self-fulfilling prophecy, limiting my growth and development. As I began to reflect on these beliefs, I realized that many of them had no basis in my current reality. They were remnants of past experiences that I had never revisited or questioned. Self-sabotage, on the other hand, can manifest in more subtle ways. Sometimes it appears in the form of procrastination, where we delay important tasks without a clear reason. At other times, it can show up as perfectionism, where we never think our work is good enough, preventing us from finishing or presenting it. Identifying these patterns of self-sabotage was a challenging process, as they often come disguised as rational justifications. However, the more aware I became of these behaviors, the more I could start to question and dismantle them. Accepting the reality of our limitations was another crucial step in this journey. We grow up hearing that we can be anything we want if we work hard enough, an inspiring idea, but one that can become oppressive when we face our own limitations. In the past, I struggled with accepting my limitations, thinking that admitting flaws or weaknesses was a sign of defeat. But in reality, recognizing our limitations is an act of courage and wisdom. Understanding that everyone has strengths and weaknesses allows us to focus on what we can improve and seek help where we need it. This acceptance does not mean resignation, but rather a more realistic and compassionate approach. By accepting my limitations, I began to develop more effective strategies to deal with them. For example, if I notice that I have difficulty maintaining concentration for long periods, I can adjust my routines to include frequent, short breaks. This adaptation is not a sign of weakness, but a smart way to work within my limits, maximizing my productivity without exhausting myself. Cultivating self-awareness is an ongoing process and essential for maintaining balance and efficiency. Staying attuned to your own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors is like keeping a window open to your mind, allowing for constant and gentle observation. The practice of self-awareness has helped me notice emotional and behavioral patterns that would otherwise go unnoticed. For example, I observe that on particularly stressful days, my patience diminishes and my propensity to react impulsively increases. Recognizing these signs, I can take steps to calm myself and avoid rash decisions. Self-awareness also helped me understand how certain emotions influence my efficiency. For instance, by acknowledging moments of anxiety, I can explore their causes and address them proactively, rather than allowing these emotions to interfere with my performance. This awareness gives me the opportunity to intervene constructively, whether by practicing breathing techniques to calm the nervous system or by adjusting my expectations to make them more realistic and achievable. The practice of keeping a journal has been a valuable tool in this process. Recording thoughts and feelings helps me clarify and organize ideas, offering a more objective perspective on my experiences. By reviewing these records, I can identify recurring patterns and areas needing special attention. Additionally, the journal becomes a safe space to express vulnerabilities and celebrate small victories, reinforcing a sense of continuous progress. Chapter 7: Observation. The art of observation is a skill many of us overlook in the whirlwind of daily life. However, I've learned that observing without judgment is an essential practice for personal growth. Throughout my journey, I've realized that the ability to look at my own behaviors and challenges objectively, without getting emotionally involved, has been one of the most powerful tools for self-awareness. This approach has allowed me to see my actions and reactions as they truly are, rather than through the distorted lens of self-criticism or self-pity. Initially, it was challenging to adopt this stance of non-judgmental observation. I had a habit of being very hard on myself, constantly pointing out flaws and criticizing myself for not being good enough. This tendency toward excessive self-criticism often left me trapped in a cycle of guilt and frustration, hindering any real progress. It was only when I began to practice detached observation that I could create a healthier mental space, where I could analyze my behaviors and challenges without the emotional baggage that usually accompany them. Objective observation allowed me to identify behavior patterns that would otherwise go unnoticed. I recall realizing that in stressful situations, I tended to seek comfort in unhealthy habits, such as overreading or procrastinating important tasks. Recognizing these repetitive patterns was an awakening. It was like seeing a part of myself operating on autopilot. This new clarity gave me the power to question these automatic behaviors and start making more conscious choices. One of the most revealing moments was when I noticed how my behavior in dealing with criticism impacted my productivity. Whenever I received negative feedback, my instinctive response was defensive, leading me to ruminate over the comment rather than using it as a growth opportunity. This attitude not only undermined my confidence, but also limited my ability to learn from mistakes. By observing this reaction, I actively began to change my approach, trying to see criticism as a valuable tool for personal and professional improvement. Focusing on areas of improvement is one of the most valuable fruits of attentive observation. By looking at my actions and behaviors without the veil of judgment, I could identify specific aspects of my life that needed attention and development. For example, I noticed that my time management was ineffective. I often found myself overwhelmed with tasks piling up, unable to prioritize them properly. This realization led me to explore organization and planning techniques that, although simple, made a significant difference in my productivity. Additionally, observation helped me recognize the importance of maintaining a balance between work and personal life. Often, in the relentless pursuit of results, I neglected my needs for rest and leisure, which ultimately affected my efficiency and well-being. By observing how this lack of balance impacted my energy and disposition, I could implement changes that prioritize self-care. This adjustment not only improved my productivity, but also increased my overall satisfaction with life. The practice of clear and focused observation allows me to direct my efforts where they are most needed. For instance, by identifying that my lack of clear communication was a barrier in professional relationships, I could dedicate time to improving this skill, attending courses and actively seeking feedback from my colleagues. This targeted approach made my interactions at work more effective, reducing misunderstandings and promoting more efficient collaboration. Another important aspect of observation is the ability to celebrate small victories. In the past, I tended to downplay my successes, always looking to the next challenge without taking time to acknowledge my achievements. Through the practice of kinder and more attentive observation, I learned to value these moments of success, no matter how small. This shift in perspective gave me a sense of progress and accomplishment, fueling my motivation and self-confidence. However, it is important to remember that observation is not an end in itself, but a tool for continuous growth. Each insight gained through this practice is an opportunity to adjust and improve, an invitation for personal development. By maintaining an attitude of curiosity and openness, we can continuously refine our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Chapter 8. Experimentation. Often, we cling to methods and routines in the hope that, if we follow a plan to the letter, we will achieve success. However, the reality is that the effectiveness of any approach can vary widely from person to person and context to context. That's why I started approaching each new method as an experiment, an opportunity to test, adjust, and learn without the weight of the fear of failure. The first time I embraced this mindset was when I decided to experiment with different time management techniques. I was constantly struggling to balance my responsibilities and felt like I never had enough time for everything. I began with the time blocking method, setting aside parts of the day for specific tasks. Initially, I felt more structured, but soon I realized that this rigidity limited my creativity and ability to handle unforeseen events. Instead of getting frustrated with the apparent failure, I saw it as a learning opportunity. I adapted my approach, incorporating more flexibility and free periods to accommodate unexpected changes. This flexibility in adjusting and refining methods became a fundamental part of my routine. While experimenting with new approaches like the Pomodoro technique, I found that while this technique may be incredibly effective for some, it created unnecessary pressure for me to complete tasks in rigid intervals. Instead of completely discarding the method, I modified it to create a balance where I use focused work cycles followed by breaks, but without the constant pressure of a timer. This adaptation allowed me to maintain focus without feeling like I was racing against the clock. Another area where this mindset of experimentation proved valuable was in improving team communication. Initially, I followed advice suggesting short daily meetings for alignment. However, this ended up being a distraction for everyone, consuming time without offering clear benefits. Instead of insisting on something that wasn't working, I proposed an alternative: longer, more detailed weekly meetings combined with quick, informal check-ins as needed. This change significantly improved the efficiency and clarity of communication within the team, while also saving valuable time. Every experimentation experience, successful or not, offers valuable lessons. For example, when trying to implement a strict morning routine, I realized that I'm not a morning person and that forcing myself to wake up early for productive activities resulted in more fatigue than productivity. Accepting this reality helped me adjust my routine to start the day more slowly and progressively, reserving the most challenging tasks for when I am more alert and energized. The key to learning from these experiences is keeping an open mind and avoiding negative judgment when things don't go as expected. This means acknowledging that failure is a natural part of the growth process. When I started exploring meditation techniques to reduce stress, I initially found it difficult to concentrate and felt like I was failing because I didn't immediately achieve a state of inner peace. Over time, I realized that the practice of meditation itself was the lesson, not reaching a perfect state of calm. This changed my approach, allowing me to appreciate the small progress and regular practice instead of seeking an unattainable perfection. Experimentation also involves listening to and accepting feedback, whether from measurable results or internal feelings. During a phase when I was trying to improve my diet and exercise habits, I kept a journal to record how I felt physically and mentally. This process of continuous feedback helped me identify patterns, such as the relationship between diet and my energy levels, allowing for continuous adjustments. The same applies to professional contexts, where feedback from colleagues and superiors has helped me refine my approach in collaborative projects, improving the quality of work and the satisfaction of all involved. I realized that this experimental approach not only improves my productivity, but also makes me more resilient and adaptable. Instead of feeling stuck with one way of doing things, I feel free to explore, adjust, and grow. This doesn't mean that every attempt at experimentation is successful, but each attempt offers a new perspective and a deeper understanding of how I function best. Thus, experimentation becomes a continuous cycle of trying, reflecting, and adjusting, allowing for constant and sustainable growth. As I conclude this journey of exploring emotions, productivity, and personal growth, it becomes clear that one of the biggest misconceptions we face is the attempt to become machine-like, seeking a cold and inhuman efficiency. This approach, though tempting in a world that values speed and effectiveness, ignores the complexity and richness of the human experience. Accepting our human nature, with all its emotions, limitations, and imperfections, is not only necessary, it is fundamental to achieving truly sustainable and meaningful productivity. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that emotions are not obstacles to overcome, but essential elements of our psyche that inform us about our needs and values. Fear, shame, guilt, and many other emotions are signals pointing to areas of our lives that need attention. Ignoring these signals or trying to suppress them can lead to an internal disconnection, resulting in stress, burnout, and ironically, a decrease in productivity. Instead, working with these emotions, embracing them and understanding their messages, allows us to navigate life more authentically and resiliently. Recognizing and accepting our limitations is another crucial piece of this puzzle. No person is infallible, and the attempt to maintain a facade of perfection is not only futile, but also exhausting. Accepting that everyone has limits creates space for self-care and the development of realistic work strategies. This includes knowing when to rest, when to seek help, and when it's time to say no. This self-compassion is what allows us to recharge and return to our goals with more vigor. Self-awareness is the compass that guides us on this journey. By maintaining a watchful and kind eye on our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, we can identify patterns that serve us and those that need to be transformed. This practice of self-knowledge is a continuous and lifelong process, a commitment to personal development that allows us to adjust and grow over time. It gives us the clarity to make choices more aligned with our values and goals, promoting a more balanced and meaningful life. Finally, the willingness to experiment and adapt is what makes this process dynamic and enriching. There is no one-size-fits-all formula for success or productivity. Each person is unique, with their circumstances, challenges, and dreams. Therefore, adopting a mindset of experimentation, where each attempt is a learning opportunity, is vital. This approach frees us from the fear of failure, allowing us to explore new approaches and find what works for us. Embracing our humanity is the true secret to productivity that is not only effective but also fulfilling. This acceptance is not a sign of weakness but a profound wisdom and understanding that, in the end, we are human beings, not machines. And it is precisely this humanity that enables us to create, innovate, and connect in deep and meaningful ways. Thank you for sticking with us until the end. Your likes and subscription are very important to us. Help us keep the Books Project alive and continue delivering high-quality content. Wishing you peace and see you next time.